Numero uno, when I show up to your site and the first thing I see is a background that is this color and a heading color that is this pink color and the text color is this color, I will leave. What's more popular right now is this kind of muted color palette where it's like pastel in the background. See this kind of pastel back here? But what you can also see from this slide, and here's kind of like me using this in practice. This slide itself is the same color as this, well, almost the same color. But having this white background helps this word to stand out. If I did not have this white background here, it would not stand out. It would be too difficult to see. And the problem with having clashing colors on your website is when something is difficult to see and read, you're going to lose people's attention. Every single thing on the internet right now contributes to the fact that we as people have like the shortest attention spans ever. So if we have to think as users going to someone's website, if I have to think really hard to focus on the words that I'm reading, I am not going to read it. It's just straight up, I'm not going to read it. It's too difficult. If it makes me think too hard, I'm going to move away. Same thing with this, where you might say like, well, this is, it's dark blue, but this is red. So it's not exactly too bad, right? It is. So this is one of the things that typically I see like right off the bat is people will use this kind of muted color in the background and the text will be like a light gray or something kind of close in value to it, which really makes it, and I have 20/20 vision. This is worth mentioning. Like I have 20/20 vision, I swear. Well, it's probably getting worse, but that's not the point. It's difficult to read. And if I have to focus really hard, I'm going to lose interest and I'm going to move away. And that's the opposite of what we want people to do. So straight off the bat, if you are looking at your site and going, why isn't anybody sticking around? If you're looking at your bounce rate and you're like, good Lord, what is happening here? It could be that one of the things that's at fault with this is that your front, like the colors that you're using are too difficult for people to read, too difficult for them to focus on, and it will hurt their eyes if they try to focus. So these are just some examples. There's plenty of other ones, but the boring kind of works better here. When I say boring, I mean like simple white backgrounds, black font color. And if you want to use new branding colors, this is a website that I like. I'm going to put it into the chat for you guys. It's coolers.co. So this is a website. If you can't figure out, or if you are struggling with kind of coming up with some different font combinations, Coolers is a really great website for you to be able to find different kind of color palettes that you can customize, that you can use to make your own. It's really simple to use and it will help you a lot in finding different colors than if you were stuck on, say, like, I want this blue. Okay, well, you can't use this darker or this kind of grayish blue also because that doesn't make sense. You could use yellow and that would make sense. So here, see how I changed that? Because blue and yellow are contrasting colors, which means that they kind of work together to not fight against each other, but will complement each other in grabbing people's attention. Let's see what kind of thing we can do with this word. We can make it black. We could make it white. Again, kind of going off of font. If you're talking about like using font colors on your website, your background should be white and your text should be black, not gray. Or if you're going to use gray, just use a very, very dark gray, not a light gray. Black is my preference. See how different these two things look? These colors here, this color palette could actually be used. Not necessarily for like the background on the website for this blue. Do not recommend that. But just having this kind of a color palette, this kind of a color way would really work very well on a website for your elements that you're using, kind of your background or your header color. If you want to use something like that, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard, straight up. Okay, so after we've talked about all of the colors that you can use for complementary things, it is, again, like I said, boring when it comes to fonts on your website itself. The boringer, the better. I've already said like the whole thing about it, if it takes people's attention to try to focus on it, to read it, they're not going to. Yes. But also just remember, sometimes having these nice and easy fonts and colors is better. There's a reason that everybody's website has black fonts on it. And it's not just because everybody likes the color black. It's because it's easy to read. And the easier that things are to read, the more likely that people are actually going to be reading them. Because again, we're fighting against all of the other things that are taking our attention, that are trying to catch our attention. It's okay to be boring and have black Arial fonts. Okay. So that's my thing, because I have a black Arial font and I love it. Because, like, let's be real, we're talking about fonts again, because this is so important. I have seen each one of these in some way, shape, or form on a blog. Maybe it's not these exactly, but it is pretty close to them. This would be someone's like header font. So yeah, of course, this looks super cute, super cool. Love this font, except for when it's on a blog post. Again, if I have to think really hard to read it, I'm not going to do it. This one, for example, this is super cute, right? Not on a website where if this is the header on inside of your blog post, I wouldn't be able to read this. Like, not I wouldn't be able to read this, but it would take a while for it to read. So this is kind of one of those things with when you're using fonts on your website, on your sales pages, on your pins, if you are using a different font because you're like, let's spice something up and throw it out there, make it easy to read. There is a time and a place for calligraphy. There's a time and a place for like an emphasis word that uses this kind of font or this kind of font. That's totally fine. I am not saying to not get creative. I am saying, however, if I see a pin that is using this font versus a pin that says the same thing using this font, which one am I going to pick on? I know what this says right away. I know that this one says bad font example. This one, and I went to Catholic school, I can read cursive. I'm like, I have to really, really want to read it. And that adds an extra step on you as the creator to really, really work hard to hook people's attention through the colors that you're using or the photos in the background that you're using. Keeping it simple is the best method. Absolutely the best method. Oops, hang on. Black fonts for blog post titles or headlines too, or use a different bolder color. I use black fonts for everything. The normal text on the blog post, the headings, the title. The only thing that is not a black font on my website or even in emails is a link. Because I obviously like we want people to be able to see the difference between like the link and the actual post, because then even if it's like underlined, people won't read it as a link. So you want to have that kind of a distinction. But as far as everything goes, I do black and black. Now I make my header fonts large. Like that's where it's saying. So like I don't think that I put that in here actually. Is size of fonts really also matters. I have seen people's sites where the font is like microscopic. And again, I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm there for. I have 20/20 vision, and even I was struggling to read it. And so that was posing a problem, and it was very clear that that was going to be problematic. So I use I think that it's either 12 or 14 font size for the body of my posts. And then I do like 4 steps up in size for H2, 5 steps up for H1 or something like that. But like there's been other sites where I've seen because I didn't add this to my slides. I'm sorry guys. Where the body font is basically the exact same size and style as the header font. You can set the headers apart by using bold. You can set them apart by using a slightly different font if you want to. So if we're talking about like, but see, this font is different than this guy. But they look fairly similar. They go together. They're not like contrasting. Like if this was the body text and this was the header text. We don't want that to happen. So as long as there is a clear distinction, I use size as the distinction, size and bold as the distinction between my headers and my body text. So those were some bad font examples. And another thing about fonts that we've started to see kind of more and more is that people are moving away from using serif fonts. This is what a serif font looks like. It's anything that has those kinds of like, see how there's like this little like boop on the top of the L. It's kind of like Times New Roman, where we were all taught to use Times New Roman on all of our like school papers. And it's just so much easier to read a Arial, Helvetica, or Roboto kind of font. There's plenty of other ones that you can use if you really want to. But when it comes to fonts on your website, that is not where I want you guys to get creative. That's not where we should want to get creative, because the goal is to get people to read the post itself. You can get creative in your pins. You can get creative in the background colors that you want to use for those pins. You can get creative with the site design that you have or with your logo if you want to. But the text in a blog post, it's basically like the news. You want people to be able to read it. You don't want them to have to really work really hard to do that. So the easier things are, the better. Is it a little boring? Yes, I get that. I totally do. I tried to use Poppins was the font that I used, which kind of reminded me of like Century Gothic from like Microsoft Word. But at the end of the day, I went back to Arial. Poppins was easy to read, but it wasn't as easy as Arial font. And so I got rid of it, and that's okay. And you're allowed to change these things, by the way. If you are on your website and you're like, I do not like this font color or this font style, you can change it. If you have a pre-bought theme, you can change it, I think. If not, I can give you guys the name of my tech guy, and he's really awesome.